I remember the exact moment it all unfolded, like a whisper from the universe that shattered the ordinary hum of the airport. A little girl, no more than 7, clutching a stranger's hand, her eyes locking onto mine with a silent plea that said, "Help me, please, before it's too late." And then she flicked her fingers in a secret sign to my husky, who erupted in barks that stopped the world. Hey, you know how sometimes life throws these curveballs that make you question everything? Well, this is one of those stories I carry with me like a warm stone in my pocket, something I pull out on quiet nights to remind myself that goodness still hides in the cracks of chaos, even when the world feels overwhelming and unpredictable. I'm Sarah, by the way, just a regular woman in her 30s traveling alone with my dog Luna, because she's more family than pet, the kind of companion who knows your silences better than your words. We've been through our share of rough patches, Luna and I, from sleepless nights to small triumphs that rebuilt us piece by piece. But that day at the airport, it changed us both in ways I still unravel. And it started with that little girl, whose courage became a turning point neither of us saw coming. Picture this. It's a bustling international terminal in Chicago, the kind where the air smells like stale coffee and hurried goodbyes, mixed with the faint tang of jet fuel seeping in from the tarmac outside and the underlying buzz of anticipation that hangs over every departure lounge. I'd just flown in from Seattle for a vet conference. I'm a veterinarian, specializing in behavioral training for service dogs, the sort who help with everything from guiding the visually impaired through crowded streets to detecting seizures before they strike, drawing on techniques pioneered by organizations like Canine Companions for Independence. Luna's my constant companion, a sleek gray husky with eyes like polished amber that seem to hold ancient secrets, and a coat that shimmers under the harsh fluorescent lights overhead, catching hints of blue in the way the bulbs flicker and hum, almost like they're breathing with the crowd. She's not just any dog, she's my emotional anchor, trained in search and rescue signals from my volunteer days at the local shelter, where we'd practice in empty fields under overcast skies. Her response is always precise and instinctive, honed by real-life drills inspired by FEMA's urban search and rescue teams. We were waiting near Gate 12, her leash loose in my hand as she sat alert, ears perked to the symphony of announcements crackling over the speakers with their tinny voices calling out delays and boarding calls, rolling suitcases rumbling across the tiled floors like distant thunder, and the occasional cry of a tired toddler echoing down the concourse, piercing the otherwise monotonous drone. I was sipping a lukewarm tea from a vending machine, Earl Grey, too weak but comforting in its familiarity, flipping through a conference agenda on my phone, noting sessions on trauma-informed training that mirrored my own path, when the crowd shifted like a slow-moving river, parting and reforming around clusters of weary travelers. Airports are like that. Everyone's in their own bubble, scrolling through emails about work deadlines or sipping overpriced lattes from those little stands that charge $5 for a thimble of espresso, the baristas calling names with practiced efficiency. But then I saw her, this tiny girl with messy brown pigtails tied loosely with mismatched ribbons that had come half undone, wearing a faded pink jacket that looked a size too big, its sleeves dangling past her knuckles as if it had been borrowed in haste from an older sibling, the fabric slightly frayed at the cuffs from too many washes. She was sandwiched between a man and a woman, both in their 40s, dressed in nondescript jeans and hoodies that screamed anonymity, the kind of people who blend into any background like extras in a crowd scene from a film. Their faces unremarkable except for the subtle tension in their postures. The man had her left hand gripped a little too tightly, his fingers white-knuckled around her small wrist, veins standing out like cords under his skin, and the woman was murmuring something low and insistent, her smile forced like plastic wrap stretched over something rotten beneath, her eyes darting to the exits every few seconds as if mapping an escape route. They were moving purposefully toward the glass doors leading to the parking lots and taxi stands, weaving through the throng of business travelers in rumpled suits and families lugging overstuffed duffels, dodging a group of laughing college kids hauling backpacks emblazoned with university logos. Their chatter about spring break plans a stark contrast to the girl's silence. The girl, she wasn't crying or fighting, which made it all the more chilling, a quiet desperation that tugged at something primal. Her face was a mask of quiet terror, lips pressed thin into a line, shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller, invisible in the shuffle of feet and voices. As they passed close by, maybe 5 feet away, close enough that I caught the faint scent of cheap cologne from the man, musky and overpowering, mixed with the girl's underlying nervousness, like the sharp edge of fear, sweat cutting through the airport's artificial chill. They brushed past a cluster of seats where I stood, nearly bumping a forgotten carry-on left by its owner. Our eyes met in that split second, a connection electric and fleeting. Hers were wide, dark pools reflecting the overhead lights and the chaos around us, pleading with an intensity that hit me like a gut punch. A wordless scream saying she was trapped in a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. Her pupils dilated with the kind of fear that freezes time. And then in a flash so subtle I almost missed it amid the distraction of a nearby announcement, she did it. Her free hand twitched at her side, fingers curling into a specific shape, a closed fist with the thumb and pinky, extended like a makeshift hook, evoking the universal call for help in sign language adaptations. Then a quick tap against her thigh twice, deliberate and trained, the motion hidden by the jacket's hem. It was the distress signal from the Young Dog Trainers Club, the one they teach kids in schools to alert service animals in emergencies, a gesture borrowed from real-life protocols used by organizations like the ASPCA and police K-9 units, where nonverbal cues have saved lives in abduction cases documented in FBI reports. I'd helped develop those modules years ago, back when I volunteered with at-risk youth programs in Seattle, collaborating with child psychologists who emphasized nonverbal cues for situations just like this. Silent calls for help that don't alert captors, tested in mock scenarios with role players and props to build muscle memory. Luna's training included it. She knew it meant danger, intervene now, drilled into her through countless sessions with treats and praise in quiet park clearings, her husky heritage making her especially attuned to pack dynamics and protective instincts, much like the sled dogs in Alaska who alert mushers to hazards on icy trails. My heart slammed against my ribs, a thunderous rhythm drowning out the PA system and the shuffle of shoes, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Luna sensed it too. Her head snapped up from where she'd been idly watching a pigeon pecking at crumbs near a trash bin, hackles rising along her back like a wave rippling across a still pond as she let out a deep, resonant bark that cut through the din like a siren-piercing fog, echoing off the high ceilings. It wasn't her usual playful woof that she'd use for squirrels darting up trees in the neighborhood park. This was her alert bark, trained to demand attention without tipping into aggression. A sound, honed from real-world demos at fire stations where she'd practiced alongside German shepherds and labs, responding to simulated emergencies with precision that earned nods from seasoned handlers. Heads turned in a ripple effect. A businessman mid-call lowered his phone, his conversation faltering. A mother with a stroller paused to look, one hand instinctively gripping the handle tighter. Whispers starting like dry leaves rustling in a breeze, spreading curiosity through the nearby group. The man with the girl froze mid-step, his grip tightening on her hand until she winced slightly, a flicker of pain crossing her face, and the woman shot a nervous glance over her shoulder, her forced smile cracking at the edges, revealing a flash of panic in her eyes. Luna barked again, louder this time, pulling toward them with insistent tugs on her leash, her body low and focused, muscles coiled under that shimmering coat, paws planted firmly on the cool tile as if staking her claim. I didn't hesitate. I unclipped her partially, just enough slack to let her lead without bolting into the crowd and causing a stampede, my own pulse racing as I scanned the area, spotting the security booth 20 yards away, its officers chatting idly behind a desk piled with monitors flickering with camera feeds, clipboards stacked haphazardly, and a half-eaten sandwich forgotten in the midst of routine. "Easy, girl," I murmured under my breath, but my voice was steady, channeling the calm I'd learned from years of handling panicked animals in the clinic. Deep breaths, firm posture, no sudden moves that could escalate, techniques straight from de-escalation training seminars I'd attended with police animal control units. Passengers paused all around us, phones lowering from ears, the usual airport apathy giving way to curiosity and concern, a few stepping closer to form a loose semicircle. "What's going on over there? Is that dog okay?" Someone muttered nearby, a woman in a business suit edging closer, her briefcase clutched like a shield, while a family nearby hushed their children, eyes wide. The little girl, her name I learned later was Mia, gave the tiniest nod in my direction, her eyes thanking me before she looked away, ducking her head to avoid the man's gaze, her pigtails swaying slightly with the motion. Security swarmed in seconds, 2 officers in crisp uniforms pushing through the gathering crowd with purposeful strides, radios crackling with urgent codes like possible 1032, minor in distress, that I'd heard in training videos from airport authority briefings. The man tried to play it cool, releasing Mia's hand just a fraction as he raised his palms in a placating gesture, saying in a rehearsed tone that sounded too smooth, "She's our daughter, officer. Just excited to get home after a long flight. You know how kids get antsy with all the waiting around." But Luna wouldn't stop, positioning herself squarely between them and the exit doors with a deliberate stance, her body language screaming warning, tail stiff and raised, ears forward and alert, a low growl rumbling in her throat that I quieted with a soft command whispered through clenched teeth. One officer knelt to calm her, gloved hand extended gently with palm up in the universal non-threat gesture, but she held her ground, whining softly now, her amber eyes fixed on Mia with an unwavering focus that spoke volumes, drawing murmurs of "smart dog" from onlookers. It was enough. The authorities separated the group efficiently, guiding the man and woman to a side area cordoned off with yellow tape that appeared from nowhere, while another officer knelt to Mia's level on the floor, her voice gentle and reassuring as she asked questions in a tone meant to soothe, like, "Hey, sweetie, can you tell me your name? We're here to help." Within minutes, the truth unraveled like a poorly knit sweater coming apart at the seams, threads of deception pulling free under scrutiny. Those parents were strangers, part of a trafficking ring targeting unaccompanied minors, a grim reality I'd read about in reports from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where statistics show airports as hotspots for such abductions, with over 2,000 cases reported annually in major hubs like O'Hare. Mia had been separated from her real mom during a chaotic layover, her mother distracted by a gate change announcement blaring overhead and a ringing phone buzzing with an urgent call from a family emergency back home, lured away with promises of candy from a nearby shop stocked with colorful wrappers and a quick game to pass the time in the play area with its plastic slides and worn cushions. She'd remembered her training from school, that one club session where they'd practice signals with volunteer dogs like Luna, role-playing scenarios with stuffed animals and props to make it fun yet vital, complete with certificates handed out like badges of honor to boost the kids' confidence. If you found this story helpful, please give it a 1 in the comments. If not, give it a 0. Your response will let me know if my story helped anyone. They detained the pair on the spot, right there in the terminal amid the flashing lights of police cruisers pulled up outside the curb with sirens silenced, but lights pulsing blue and red against the glass, while Mia was wrapped in a soft emergency blanket by a kind-faced social worker whose badge glinted. Under the lights, her demeanor calm and maternal as she offered a juice box from her kit. She was reunited with her frantic mother, who'd been searching every gate, her voice hoarse from calling Mia's name over the noise, posters already half-printed at a nearby Kinko's for a desperate missing child alert. I watched from the sidelines as the woman, tear-streaked and shaking, her blouse rumpled from hours of pacing the concourses, dark circles under her eyes from the stress, scooped Mia up in an embrace that seemed to melt the tension from both of them, like something out of a dream you don't want to wake from, their sobs mingling in a release of pure relief, hands clutching fabric as if afraid to let go. "Thank you," she mouthed to me over the heads of the dispersing crowd, her eyes brimming with a gratitude that needed no words, raw and profound, and I just nodded back, Luna leaning heavily against my leg, her energy spent but her posture radiating a quiet pride, chest heaving from the exertion. But here's where it gets personal, the part I don't share with just anyone, the layers that make this more than a news blip or a viral clip. It became the cornerstone of my own quiet reconstruction. That moment didn't just save Mia. It pulled me back from my own edge, reminding me of the fragile threads that connect us all, visible only in hindsight. See, Luna and I hadn't always been this seamless team, this duo that turned heads at parks and conferences with our synchronized steps. 2 years before, I'd lost my husband, Tom, to a car accident on a rainy night much like those quiet Japanese evenings I imagine, a soft patter on the window panes of our old Victorian overlooking the sound, steam rising from a forgotten mug of chamomile tea on the nightstand beside his side of the bed, the hum of a distant city fading into the storm's rhythm, punctuated by the occasional whoosh of passing cars on wet pavement. He'd been my rock, the one who encouraged me to start the dog training programs for kids, sketching out flyers on napkins during our late-night study sessions in vet school. His enthusiasm infectious as he dreamed of reaching hundreds of children, his pencil strokes capturing logos of paws and smiling faces. After he was gone, the world felt too sharp, too empty, colors muted like an overexposed photo washed out by grief, sounds amplified into echoes that rang hollow. I withdrew into our apartment in Seattle, barely leaving the house except for clinic shifts where I'd go through motions on autopilot, letting my practice slide into a fog while grief gnawed at the edges of every decision, from meals to midnight wakefulness. Luna was a rescue then, a skittish husky pup dumped at the shelter with scars from who knows what abuse, faint white lines across her muzzle from old fights, perhaps with other strays on the streets, and a limp that faded with time but left her cautious of open spaces. She mirrored my pain, wary of touch, loyal but distant, flinching at sudden noises like the slam of a car door or a dropped pan, her whines echoing my unspoken sobs. Our bond grew slowly, through long walks in the misty forests around Puget Sound, where the evergreens whispered secrets in the wind, rustling their needles, and the air smelled of damp earth and pine sap after a shower, the path crunching underfoot with fallen cones. I talked to her during those hikes, spilling out the grief I couldn't voice to friends or family who meant well, but tiptoed around the void, my words tumbling into the fog like confessions to a confessor who never judged. What if I never feel whole again? What if this emptiness is all that's left, a shadow following me everywhere? I'd say, voice cracking against the quiet, and she'd press her cold nose to my hand, her warmth seeping through like a silent promise that time could mend even the deepest cracks, her steady gait pulling me forward one step at a time. We trained together in those early days, her learning basic commands like sit and stay in the backyard under the drizzle that turned the grass to mud while I learned to trust again, to step outside without the weight of loss dragging me down like an anchor. Sessions ending with her head in my lap as the rain eased. The Young Dog Trainers Club was our turning point. A ragtag group of neighborhood kids, wide-eyed and eager with backpacks slung over chairs, meeting every Saturday in the community center with its scuffed wooden floors that creaked under small feet and walls papered in faded posters of famous working dogs from Lassie to modern therapy stars. Volunteers like old Mr. Patel, the retired teacher who brought his golden retriever Sonny every week without fail, rain or shine, turned it into something magical. His presence a steady rhythm amid the youthful energy. Mr. Patel was one of those textured souls, you know? Gray hair thinning at the temples with a persistent cowlick, glasses perpetually fogged from the steam of his herbal tea, brewed in a battered thermos that smelled of cardamom and cloves. But his stories lit up the room like fireflies at dusk, drawing the children into a circle on the rug. He'd emigrated from India decades ago, fleeing partition-era chaos that tore families apart, and he'd tell the kids about how dogs had saved his village during monsoons, carrying messages through chest-high floods or alerting to snakes in the rice fields. Tales drawn from real folklore like the loyal dogs and Panchatantra fables, and his own childhood memories of strays that became guardians. "They're not just animals," he'd say, his voice gravelly with a lingering accent and the weight of years, settling into a folding chair as Sonny flopped at his feet with a contented sigh, her tail thumping softly. "They're bridges to what's good in us, loyal spirits that see through our fears and guide us home." The children adored him. Little ones like Jamal, who stuttered through his sentences at first, words catching like brambles, but found confidence commanding his family's beagle with clear, firm words during drills, his face lighting up with each successful heel, or Sophia, the girl with intricate braids adorned with colorful beads that clicked as she moved, who sketched every dog we trained in a notebook she carried everywhere, her drawings capturing the subtle twitches of ears and tails with an artist's eye, inspired by real observation techniques from art therapy programs for kids. Mia reminded me so much of Sophia that day at the airport. That same spark of quiet determination hidden behind wide eyes, a resilience born from small, everyday battles. After the chaos settled and the terminal returned to its rhythmic bustle, announcements resuming with their mechanical cheer, travelers shuffling onward with renewed purpose, the police asked if I'd come to the station to give a formal statement, their notepad filling with details of the signal and Luna's response, an officer jotting notes with a pen that scratched audibly. That's when I met Mia's mom, Elena, a single parent from a dusty suburb outside Dallas, where the summers bake the earth to cracked clay, exhausted from the red-eye flight and the sheer terror of those lost minutes that felt like hours. She was in her late 20s, with laugh lines etched around her eyes that hadn't seen much laughter lately, deepened by sleepless nights and worries, her hands calloused and strong from long shifts waitressing at a roadside diner, flipping burgers and pouring coffee for truckers who tipped in loose change, her apron stained with memories of hurried orders. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she hugged Luna gently, careful not to overwhelm the dog, who accepted the affection with a soft thump of her tail against the station's linoleum floor. Mia, peeking from behind her mom's legs with that pink jacket still zipped to her chin, the ribbons in her hair now fully unraveled, reached out tentatively to pet the husky, her small fingers burying into the thick fur with a wonder that softened her features. "You did the signal so brave, just like we practiced in club," I told her, kneeling to her level on the cool floor, and her face lit up with a shy smile, the first real one I'd seen since the incident, revealing a missing front tooth from a playground tumble. Elena invited me for coffee the next day before her connecting flight home to Texas, and we met at a quiet diner just off the airport grounds, the kind with cracked vinyl booths that stuck to your jeans in the summer heat, the hum of a jukebox playing old country tunes like Patsy, Klein's wistful ballads about lost love, and waitresses calling orders in a comforting drawl that wrapped around you like a familiar blanket. Luna sprawled under the table, her head resting warmly on my foot as if anchoring me to the moment, her breaths even and reassuring, while Mia colored on a paper placemat with crayons from the server, drawing a heroic husky with a flowing cape and a little girl waving from its back, adding details like airport signs and security guards in blue. Elena opened up slowly over steaming mugs of diner coffee, black for her, with a splash of milk for mine, like unfolding a well-worn letter sealed with years of unspoken worries, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. She'd been raising Mia alone since her husband deployed overseas with the army, never returning from a patrol in the Middle East that ended in an ambush, leaving behind a flag-folded uniform presented at a somber ceremony and a house full of echoes, from empty chairs at dinner to unanswered questions in the night. The trip was meant to be a fresh start, a visit to extended family in Chicago for a cousin's wedding filled with music and reunion. But the separation at the gate, distracted by a frantic phone call from work about a missed shift during a staffing shortage, had turned it into a nightmare straight out of those late-night true crime podcasts that detail real abductions with chilling precision. I froze when I realized she was gone, Elena confessed, stirring her black coffee absently with a spoon that clinked against the ceramic mug, her gaze distant for a moment as if replaying the horror. Security thought I was negligent at first, grilling me like I'd handed her off myself, their questions sharp as knives until they verified my ID. But that dog, your dog, she knew. Somehow she just knew what was wrong, cutting through the noise like a lifeline. We talked for hours that stretched into the afternoon, the diner's clock ticking softly on the wall adorned with faded photos of regulars, about loss and resilience, how dogs sense the invisible threads of fear and pain that humans try to hide behind smiles or distractions. I shared about Tom then, how Luna had pulled me from my fog one rainy evening when I sat staring at his photo on the mantel, the frame gathering dust, tears blurring the edges of his smile, the room heavy with the scent of cooling takeout I'd forgotten to eat amid the numbness. She'd nudged a toy into my lap, a chewed-up rope from our training sessions, frayed and familiar from games in the yard, and something in me cracked open, letting a sliver of light pierce the darkness, much like the way dawn filters through Pacific Northwest clouds after a storm, gradual but undeniable. From there, our lives intertwined in unexpected ways, like vines creeping up a trellis you didn't know was there, steady and organic. Elena and I stayed in touch at first through hesitant emails, updates on Mia's school plays where she'd take the stage with a script in hand, or Luna's latest antics chasing shadows in the living room, turning to weekly calls that filled my evenings with laughter I hadn't realized I'd missed. Her Texas twang a welcome change from the rain-soaked quiet, then to visits that bridged the miles between Seattle's evergreens and Dallas's wide-open skies. She joined a local dog trainers group back in her hometown, inspired by Mia's story and the power of those simple signals that turned crisis into rescue, and started volunteering at a no-kill shelter on weekends, walking litters of puppies through dusty fields and teaching basic obedience to families in need, drawing from online resources like the AKC's community programs. Mia, that fierce little spark with her pigtails and quick mind, became pen pals with the kids in my club, sending drawings of Luna adventuring through airports and jungles, her letters dotted with questions about husky care, like how to brush their shedding undercoats without getting fur everywhere, or what games keep their energy in check, her handwriting improving with each envelope. Mr. Patel met them once during a grainy video call on a chilly winter evening when snow dusted the windows, his face lighting up the screen from his cozy living room filled with bookshelves of worn volumes, Sonny snoring in the background with paws twitching in dreams. He chuckled at Mia's artwork, his eyes twinkling behind those fogged glasses as he adjusted them with a gnarled finger. Ah, the girl with the magic hands, saving the day like a story from my old village tales, where dogs outsmarted thieves under the moon. Keep drawing, child. Art and dogs, they heal the world in ways words can't touch. Elena beamed, sharing her own sketches of the shelter dogs, rough but heartfelt lines capturing floppy ears and hopeful gazes. And in that digital gathering, bonds formed across screens, proving connection defies distance, much like how global online communities support rescue efforts today. But Luna, oh, she was the true heart of it all, the steady pulse beneath the surface that kept everything flowing. After the airport, her confidence soared in ways I could see in her gait, the way she held her head higher on our daily walks through the neighborhood, past blooming cherry trees dropping petals like confetti and picket fences where cats watched from perches. Huskies are pack animals by nature, wired for protection and endurance from their Siberian sled dog roots, bred to pull loads across frozen tundras in teams that relied on intuition. But hers was a quiet wisdom, earned through trials that tested her spirit and mine. We'd go on longer hikes along the coastal trails, her trotting ahead on the gravel paths lined with ferns unfurling in the spring damp, pausing every so often to look back over her shoulder with those amber eyes as if to say, "Keep up. We've got places to go, stories to chase beyond the horizon." There were challenges, of course, woven into the fabric of our routine like knots in a rope. One bitter winter she got sick, a lingering virus from her shelter days flaring up unexpectedly after a cold snap, leaving her lethargic and feverish, her usual vibrant energy dimmed to whimpers in the night that pulled me from sleep. I spent those long nights at the clinic, monitoring her IV drip in a quiet exam room lit by a single desk lamp casting warm shadows, whispering encouragements as the clock ticked past midnight. The only sounds her shallow breaths and the distant rumble of traffic on the interstate carrying late-night drivers. The vet on call, Dr. Ramirez, a no-nonsense woman with tattooed arms inked with intricate mandalas from her travels in Southeast Asia, where she'd volunteered at elephant sanctuaries, and a soft spot for rescues that belied her tough exterior forged in high-stress ER shifts, stayed late to help, brewing strong coffee in the break room with its humming fridge and stacked supplies. "Dogs like her teach us endurance," she said, adjusting the blanket over Luna's shivering form with gentle hands that had set countless fractures, her voice a low anchor in the sterile space filled with the faint scent of antiseptic. "They don't quit on us. No matter how rough the trail, we owe them the same grit, just like those street dogs in Manila that survive monsoons." Drawing from real cases she'd handled, like a collie that survived parvovirus through sheer will and round-the-clock care, Dr. Ramirez shared tips on supportive care, fluid balances, fever checks, and together we nursed Luna back, her recovery marked by tentative tail wags that grew into full-body wiggles, celebrated with a gentle walk in the clinic's back lot under starry skies. Through it all, I healed more deeply, the airport incident acting as a catalyst for ripples I hadn't anticipated, spreading like stones skipped across a calm pond. It made local headlines briefly. A feel-good story amid the usual churn of politics and weather reports on the evening news, with a reporter interviewing me curbside, microphone in hand, and it drew people to my programs like moths to a porch light on a summer night. Neighbors who'd never noticed the shelter before, folks like the young couple down the street with their toddler just learning to walk, wobbly steps toward everything new, started adopting pups and signing up for classes, their home filling with the joyful chaos of a new family member. toys scattered and barks greeting visitors. Volunteers poured in from all corners. A retired firefighter with his lab mix eager for purpose after years of sirens, sharing tales of dogs in disaster zones like the California wildfires. A high school teacher bringing her class for field trips, notebooks out to document behaviors, turning the club into a thriving hub of activity with waiting lists for sessions. There was this one boy, Tyler, a shy foster kid with a history of running away from placements, his small frame always tense like a coiled spring ready to bolt, who bonded with a border collie named Scout, rescued from a hoarding situation where she'd been overlooked amid dozens of others. Watching him learn the signals during sessions, his small hands mimicking Mia's gesture with growing precision, fist closed, thumb and pinky out, tap-tap on the leg, practicing until it felt natural, filled me with that thread of light, the compassion that binds strangers into something stronger, his breakthroughs echoing studies from the ASPCA on how animal interactions lower cortisol in at-risk youth. Tyler's story echoed real foster care stats I'd studied in journals, where animal companionship reduces anxiety by up to 30%, leading to fewer disruptions. And in our group, he found a voice, commanding Scout with a steadiness that surprised even him, eventually opening up about his fears during a quiet after-session chat. Years passed like pages in a well-loved book, each chapter adding depth without erasing the last, turning acquaintances into family. Elena and Mia visited Seattle once during a summer break when the air hummed with cicadas and fairy horns, flying in on a clear day when the mountains stood sharp against the endless blue sky, peaks dusted with lingering snow. We took them to Alki Beach, where the salt water lapped at pebbled shores with a rhythmic hush. Gulls wheeled overhead calling to each other, and the Olympic range loomed distant and majestic. Luna splashed in the shallow waves, her paws kicking up foam that sparkled in the sun as Mia laughed, trying to keep up in her bare feet, toes curling into the wet sand, her pigtails whipping in the breeze. Elena and I sat on a weathered driftwood log smoothed by tides, sharing silences more than words at first, the rhythm of the tide underscoring our quiet reflections, gratitude weaving through the air like the scent of seaweed on the breeze mixed with sunscreen. She told me about her new routine, balancing shifts with volunteer hours at the shelter, where she'd started a junior handler program modeled after mine. Mia thriving in school with a newfound interest in animal science, dissecting frog models with enthusiasm, and I shared updates on the club, how Tyler had aged out of foster care but returned as a junior trainer, his confidence a testament to small victories, now mentoring newcomers with Scout at his side. Now, on quieter days when the city fades to a distant hum of buses and voices, and I sip tea by the window, perhaps a blend of green and jasmine, steaming gently as rain taps like gentle fingers on the glass, blurring the view of streetlights flickering on, I think of that hook in time, the girl's signal slicing through the ordinary like a beam in fog, Luna's bark echoing like a call to awaken the indifferent. It wasn't epic in the movie's sense, no slow-motion heroics or swelling soundtrack with orchestral swells, just human fragility meeting animal instinct in the most ordinary of places, a terminal full of fleeting lives. And in that meeting, we all found our way back to peace, to understanding that even in the densest crowd, someone, or some dog, is always watching, ready to bridge the gap with loyalty and light, turning strangers into saviors. It's funny how one moment lingers, echoing with hope long after the noise fades into memory. Mia's grown now, into a teenager with her mother's determination etched in her jawline and a pup of her own to train, a scruffy mutt from the shelter that follows her commands with eager eyes, sending videos of their progress that make me smile over morning coffee, her voice narrating tips she's picked up. Luna, with gray frosting her muzzle like winter's first snow on branches, still curls at my feet during those reflective evenings, her breaths steady and reassuring, a living reminder of paths walked together. Life's not perfect, full of its own storms that brew suddenly and calms that settle slowly, but it's threaded with these warm truths, gestures of compassion that ripple outward, bonds that endure through seasons, inviting us to reflect, to empathize, to carry on with a little more light in our steps, one paw print at a time, leaving trails for others to follow.